So we'll use this to record class today and download the video in case anybody really needs a video of me talking. All right, so today we are picking up where we left off last week, and we'll spend the first couple minutes checking in on our basic assignments for this part of the semester so far, and then address any questions anybody has, any further questions on using Word, getting your outline together and stuff like that. And then we'll start jumping into some of our sort of lecture and discussion type topics for the kind of the middle part of the semester. So first things first, let's check in. How is the annotated bibliography going? Meeting with the librarian. Have made a bunch of progress yet. That's okay. If anybody is like not quite to the point of genuinely knowing, what your research question is, like your actual research question beyond the scope of this class, it can be difficult to start putting together a pretty targeted literature review and stuff like that. So that's okay. If you're in that spot, don't stress, don't feel like you need to just write something for the sake of writing something for this class. Just give your best guess on where you think it's going to go, and you're not likely to be completely wrong with that. So you waste minimal effort by going with your best guess, and then, of course, talking with your advisor to narrow down that research question kind of as soon as possible. So that could be sort of the unifying research question for a dissertation, and then typically several sub-research questions, much more specific and kind of narrow research questions, each of which might become its own manuscript out of the 2, 3, 4 manuscripts in a dissertation. For a thesis, your research question is probably your targeted, more specific research question, but it can take some real conversations with your advisor to get to that point. What are we really going after with this? It's a good conversation to have. But as far as your annotated bibliography goes, you probably know your research area well enough, even if you don't have your research question, to start looking up literature items, especially recent studies. So kind of weight things more heavily towards what is more recent and or what is heavily or ubiquitously cited in your particular field. So it might be a study from the 1980s, but it's got 15,000 citations, 15,000 other papers have pointed back to the study and found this one useful. Very commonly, there are some methods studies that describe some key method that you're going to use. In survey research, Dillman's work is cited over and over and over and over again, tens of thousands of citations per publication. That research group is kind of legendary in that way, but it's more method stuff. They don't know anything about, who you're surveying or something like that. They do know a lot about how to do a trustworthy, well-calibrated, well-sampled, well-substantiated, well-analyzed survey. And so instead of having to explain all of those things in your method section, you're going to be the 20,001st person citing a Dillman study if you're doing human surveys. So that is a good way to do it. But also, looking for any kind of criticisms. Usually the first generation of citations pointing back to a paper are doing one of two things. They're extending it and saying, this was really good. I can use this. I want to catapult or springboard off of this into my own work. Or they're saying, we see a problem with this previous study, and we did our study to countermand it or to illustrate a better way than this. We have great respect for that research group. It's all very diplomatically worded usually. The gloves come off at conferences. But in publication, right? You don't want to pin anybody down, so everybody's very careful, usually. So it tends to be one of those two things. So if you have a particular study where you start to run across the same study cited by all of the literature that you're going after, go ahead and get a copy of that study, but keep an eye out for any studies that have genuine criticisms of that. It's very important for you to to spot that no study is perfect, even the well-regarded ones. No study is exhaustive and completely comprehensive and generalizable. We'll talk about what comprehensivity and generalization means specifically for this class later on. Okay, so keep an eye out for different kinds of studies. And at this stage, wherever you're at, it is always literature gathering season. And even when you reach theoretical saturation, meaning you're not finding any new information among new publications that you're reading and reviewing, and that's your signal to stop gathering for this particular effort, you're still gonna run across studies, interesting publications and stuff like that that might be cool for your next study. But you're real focused on this one, but you don't want to lose that study. So throw that new study into your annotated bibliography. It may not make it into your thesis, but it sure makes your next research effort a heck of a lot easier and more interesting because you've already got some of that lit search done. Your next project is not likely to be 100% distinct from your previous one. So your annotated bibliography, anywhere there's an overlap, you've already got that overlap covered, and whatever other new studies you've had a chance to kind of salt in there just at random. So, 30, 40, 50% of your lit search for next study might already be done. Might already be done by this point if you're a little bit further along, okay? So just to encourage you on that. All right, how about your research notebook, field notebook, log notebook, lab notebook?
I watched the Zoom presentation last Thursday of something I know nothing about. It was that guy talking about the Mississippi River, all that stuff. So I just watched that.
Okay.
And just as an observer of the presentation, that was good. Used lots of pictures, lots of graphs. It was, of course, they used things, they were so excited about this research. I just might have that same excitement. He used the word treasure trove like 3 times. So he was really excited about his research. So that made me, happy for him.
Okay, cool. Only time will tell if it was actually a treasure trove or if he was just being a hype man,
Did you see that Dr. Ruffner is going to participate? They're going to do a presentation on the Afghanistan project. Oh, let us know.
He and Groniger have done a couple of those in the past. Are they doing another wave?
There's one I think at the Carmel Civic Center. So
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah.
You had it, I think, in this. You guys all get the email every Sunday night, I hope, from the college. If you scroll through there, we will put anything that's sent to us in that email. So I'll find it because it's like, wow, working with that project on the budget.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, talking about agroforestry, and the guy next to you has a rocket launcher on his shoulder. It's different.
They have some awesome, they have some stories.
Yeah.
Awesome. They have some stories.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so lab notebooks generally going okay? Yeah.
I did study tonight actually, which was cool. Like just driving in the woods or in the middle of nowhere, I just get ideas even for my final not dissertation defense, but the final defense. Like I had ideas of what I want to do for that. It's like, okay, that's a year away, but I just wrote it down because later that day it was already quality what I was thinking. But like, oh wait, I have an idea of my last chapter of the thesis. So like, okay, put it in there. Or where I want it headed or what kind of spirit I want it headed.
Yeah. And if you're worried that you're going to have kind of too much to sift through at the tail end of the process, like I've got all these, random shower thoughts and stuff like that, that I thought might be interesting at the time. How do I sift through all of this in terms of compiling my discussion, my conclusions, stuff like that? That is a huge problem, said nobody ever, right? It's very, very easy, especially when you're basically writing with a lot of hindsight at the tail end of your composition process, putting together your final presentation or defense draft of your thesis or whatever. It's very, very easy to spot something that was an interesting idea at the time, but just not the right fit for this particular study or manuscript. And you just delete it, or put it in kind of a parking lot document some people use, and save it for some other project another time. That surface is very easy. It's painfully obvious. Oh, that was a cool idea. It just doesn't fit with this study, even though it seemed like it might back at the time. So the capture and edit out phase, super easy on both ends. Very, very quick and easy. So this is doing it right. Further to the idea of driving through the woods and just thinking about your project and so forth. Professional researchers and writers of all stripes, not just science writers, will deliberately use techniques like going on a walk or a drive or something like that, where your body is occupied with something and your mind is free to roam. Creatives call this making yourself be bored. So when you're constantly checking your phone, like I am, right? Many of us are kind of tethered umbilically to our devices. There are notifications. There are hundreds of emails to sift through at any given moment. There's, grant proposal opportunities. There's everything. There's class planning, all of it. If you can force yourself to get away from your devices, my wife and I, when we can, once a year, we'll go for about a week to a place where there's no Wi-Fi or even cellular access on purpose. And part of it's just to, relax, reconnect and all that stuff. And part of it is to just to get okay with being bored. And you will find that your mind just explodes with all of these things that are so great to capture for work. And if you get it in your research notebook, then you don't have to keep thinking about that thought while you're on that kind of mini vacation, sabbatical, sequestration, whatever it is, okay? So let yourself be bored. Give yourself space. Give your mind space to get off of the dopaminergic cycle of saturated colors and notifications and little red dots saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. Skinner box or dopaminergic game design is a very powerful thing that organizations like Facebook and Google and so forth have used to hijack our brain chemistry in a very, very profitable way. So we want to be conscious of that. It's okay. They're just trying to make money off you. They're a corporation. That's what they do. But we can be in charge of ourselves and our minds. And by turning that stuff off, you will surprise yourself at how smart and creative and amazing you are, even when you're feeling kind of burned out and wasted. Okay, cool. So give yourself the space to do that, even if it's just one day a week. My cell phone does not go on for any reason, kind of a day. Let's see, what else? That brings us to working on outlines and so forth. We got headings done. We got subheadings done. Maybe starting to move into just bullet level, phrase level, individual chunks of content out of interesting articles and so forth. How is that part going?
I've been jotting down more, thinking about my methods recently.
Okay.
Study this summer because I'm going to actually start my field research this summer.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of bullet points about my methods.
Cool. All right. It's kind of encouraging to see that it's actually getting longer and longer and longer. Okay. Right on. Anybody else?
I'm not there yet. So
That's okay.
still get there.
How's the lit review compilation going? You have a stack of stuff that you've been moving through, or you're just building the stack, or where we at?
I have, what's like you go down rabbit holes with different search tools and certain words and topics take you off on.
For sure.
So that's where I am. I'm just kind of been going through searching for keywords for my topic and kind of putting them together in my content. And going through those and starting to read them. So I feel like I'm just like all over the place.
That's okay, right? Especially early on in your lit search. It's going to feel that way because it legitimately is that way. You don't know what you don't know until you start knowing things. That's okay. So yeah, give yourself space to kind of be comfortable with that ambiguity for a while. And pretty soon you'll be able to start recognizing things that you've already read once, twice, three times, and get different perspectives, triangulating on each of these ideas. Yeah. And then pretty quickly you do get to that theoretical saturation phase of, okay, I've seen everything I think I need to see on this. It's time to start collating and building this into a narrative instead of just a bunch of, sort of constellation points of information or previous work. Yeah, so that's all right. Okay, good. So from there, if the putting things into outline phase is, generally getting started or mostly done already, how's everybody doing on using Word to sort of wrangle all of this stuff, or another word processor app? I noticed one problem in the template that I sent you guys last week, so I'll demonstrate how to fix systematic problems or structural problems right quick. But how's it going?
I formatted my entire logo onto this thing, and it's so helpful.
Awesome.
I really enjoyed it.
Good.
I like clicking through little bits and zoomed.
I find it very satisfying and reassuring. Like, even if I don't know exactly what all of my methods are, at least I can click and go to the methods section and be like, oh, well, I have it. It's ready and waiting for me to just, put things in as I do find them. It's it's very reassuring for me. I don't know, whatever. So I noticed this morning as I was pulling this up for class that all of the body level text, the thesis normal style, in this template document that I sent you guys through the course website, it's all, you see how it's all indented an extra ½ inch from the left-hand side? That's wrong. That's going to make this document quite a bit longer than it should be, and the graduate school is not going to be happy with me because it looks like I'm using an 1.5 inch margin on the left-hand side, and that's not actually the case. So if I am doing this inefficiently and manually, I will mouse over all of those lines, highlight it, and then drag the alignment pips on the ruler. You may need to go to the view menu and check the box for ruler. But this is a quick way to do this. But I have to do that paragraph by paragraph. And that is a recipe for disaster when you've got anything over like a couple of pages, right? Your time is too important for that. So instead of that, we'll go to the thesis normal style and try and figure out what happened. So indentation is handled on the paragraph menu. As you can see, everything, including the first line, is supposed to be indented, according to this, by ½ inch. That's not right. So we'll put 0 there. And I'm not going to indent the first line for this at this point. Okay, so that goes to 0. Hit OK. It automatically updates the entire document, and every other style based on thesis normal just moved left ½ inch as well. Okay, so I didn't have to go through the whole document. Like this was also improperly indented. Now it's flush left with the left margin. Okay, so thesis normal is a style that I created based on normal, which is like the fundamental basic document, what font, what size, what paragraph style, all that stuff. Okay. Cool. Now it's fixed and I don't have to worry about it ever again. Okay. So that's that. Are there any other questions on kind of the mechanics of wrangling Word? It is kind of satisfying to have an outline and get it all sort of set up. You can move around, especially as the document gets bigger. Anything over a couple of pages, you're going to waste a lot of time scrolling back and forth. So getting this set up well and early is very useful for us. And at the tail end of the process, again, we'll use the same efficiency to get things like your list of tables, table of contents, all that paginated and hyperlinked for you and ready to go. Any questions about this?
Hyperlink, just curious. Hyperlink like they do in articles to the document. Like.
Oh yeah. So I believe it's already set up like that. Let's find an example citation here. So, chapter 1, introduction. All right, so real inserted citation from the manager. I didn't just type open parentheses, park, comma, 2022, close parentheses. I typed open parentheses, went to insert, what's it, cross-reference, and on from there. Okay, so using the process. And I think, no, it doesn't hyperlink. I'm sorry. Let's see. Can't remember if cross-references automatically are supposed to or not. Yeah, insert as hyperlink. So. All right, but a reference is not a cross-reference, is a source. So if you're not a menus person, I'm old. And so I'm used to menus and not fancy graphical icons and stuff like that. So if you go into the references tab of the ribbon up top and you insert a citation, that's again separate from a cross-reference, and that's how you get that text in there. And it shows up like we saw last week in the cited and the bibliography as separate lists. If you insert both of those. Okay, so this is nothing. It's not highlighted as a field. I just typed this one in. So yeah, cross-references are hyperlinked throughout because, you know, click it and you go to the reference across the document. So the way this would look is, let's say, let's create a new reference here. This is a sentence that refers to a figure. And then we've all seen in articles where it says figure 5 or whatever. So if you want to cite or refer to that figure, that is a cross-reference. We'll insert that. Cross-reference, I got a couple of sample figures in here, I believe. Figure 1, example sitemap figure from research at Wilson's Creek. For a parenthetical inline reference, I don't want the entire caption, the entire title of that figure. I just want it to say, in this case, figure 1. So just label and number. Insert as hyperlink, good. And hit insert. That's it. It is hyperlinked to the figure. And so forth. Okay. Now, if so that map, this example figure, is currently figure 1. If I put a figure in my method section before that, like an earlier sitemap or a conceptual diagram in my literature review, that one would become figure 1. And my current figure 1, that map in methods, would become figure 2. I really don't want me or you to have to spend any time updating all of those numbers. So if you insert a figure caption through the insert menu or the references or cross-references thing in the ribbon here, it will automatically renumber those figures, and it will automatically renumber the cross-reference here, this parenthetical hyperlink that says figure 1 that we can click to go to that figure. It would change to figure 2. The figure caption would say figure 2, sitemap of Wilson's Creek National Battlefield. And in the list of tables and figures up top, once we update it, it doesn't do it automatically because that gets pretty laggy on a big document. It will only do it when you ask it to. It will also say figure 1 is now this new inserted figure, this conceptual diagram, and figure 2 is now renumbered as the second figure in line or in sequence in that list of figures. Okay, so that would go up above here. All right, so all that stuff is auto magical and so forth. we have found in the past working on this particular workflow that if you have like a scratch document or a sandbox document that you're inserting, figure captions, table titles, cross references, all these invisible fields that are auto updated and cross referenced and hyperlinked and stuff like that, Word can get kind of confused if you're cutting and pasting from a sandbox document into this. So do this stuff in the final target document as it's, an outline and growing in size and content. And then as that outline gets edited into, each bullet point becomes a sentence, clusters of sentences becomes paragraphs, and clusters of paragraphs becomes headed sections, bunches of headed sections become chapters, and so forth. Word is generally very, very good at keeping all of that straight, as long as it's within a single document. Cutting and pasting from one to another can get confusing. It will try to help you. Like if you try to, say, cut this out of this document, it will automatically try to highlight the entire field so you're not capturing just like the park comma and like cutting it in half and it's this weird fragment of a cross-reference or a citation in this case. Figure 1 is a cross-reference. But it's not perfect. So again, generally try to keep this indexing and hyperlinking and stuff like that, which is awesome and super efficient and useful, but it's not super smart across documents, especially across documents from different versions of Word. So if you are, upgrading to the university's site license of Office 360, and you have, Office for Mac 2011, it's good to start clean and fresh with documents instead of copy pasting things in. Okay. It is perfectly safe to copy paste stuff if it's just pure flat text. So this is just a hand typed sentence bullet point, right? That's okay. So no big deal there. All right. Glad to hear it's going well, and that it's reassuring. Any questions on how to do this stuff? Otherwise, we'll start to move on with the next thing.
I'm not going to have questions until I really get into doing all of it, and then I'll find out what I'm confused.
No sweat. All right. I'm totally here for you this semester. And again, I'm available during office hours outside of this class as well. Or if you're busy with things and can't make office hours, just send me a text message through the number on the course syllabus or send me an email. I generally see text messages that day. I generally will not see an email immediately. Like I'm teaching class right now, I'm not checking my email. So if you need me urgently to help answer a question to help get your proposal unstuck or whatever, I'm really happy to do that. I would love to help you with that, but probably a text message will see me faster. Okay. All right. Cool. That's that then. So with that, I'm going to save this, and hopefully later today I'll have a chance to update the not properly left edge formatted template that is on our course website. If you are working off of that document instead of this one that's going to go up, you can make the same change I did in about as little time as I did. Right-click on the thesis normal style preview in the ribbon, or go to the format menu, go to style. I will also bring up a bunch of previews. You can find thesis normal in this list and modify it from there. Again, that was in the paragraph section. So bottom left corner on my screen. Paragraph, and change indentation from 0.5 in the left box to 0. You would indent the first line of typical text by a ½ inch or 5 spaces, whatever, using the special dialog box off to the right. Special cases. First lines, you can do a hanging indent like in a table of references or list of references. Works cited. This is called a hanging indent, which is a very common formatting style for references. It puts a little bit more emphasis on the first line instead of on the body of it, because a lot of references are 1 to 2 to 3 lines. Okay, so hanging indent. is that style. And hanging is one of the choices for special formatting in that paragraph style setup box. Okay, cool. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's get into some other things. So this is kind of the moment where we get to switch from sort of mechanics of how to write in Word and stuff like that into some of the more conceptual parts of our class for sort of the techniques of research methods and so forth. So let's see. Let's get to those bits. A couple of key figures and so forth. All right, so as well for Zoom. Hey, Maggie. All right, we will screen share up and around.
Hello.
All right. Cool. So let's get into some of these. We're going to go from, there are basically two ways to run research. We'll see a couple of conceptual model diagrams of this here in a bit, but basically we're in the knowledge generation business. And knowledge comes in a couple of flavors. We could call it data. We could call it information. And we could call a distillation of data or information theory. Okay, so theory is not data, data is not theory, and so forth. But we tend to, at least in Western cultures, think of things this way. So this would be theory to research to fact. This is deductive, reductionist reasoning. And the idea is that we want to, like Reagan versus the Soviets, trust but verify, right? When somebody makes some kind of assumption when it comes to medical research, which could affect all of us or whatever, we could just be dealing with somebody who's making something up, and we don't necessarily have to agree with that. So statisticians, a couple of the stats professors around campus have this poster on their door that says, "In God we trust, all others bring data." And you know what? Like, that's satisfying to me. I like that. Our alternatives to research are basically these. So this is a kind of a philosophy of science and research discussion for today and tomorrow, or today and Thursday, right? Overgeneralization is where somebody out beyond what is actually supported by the facts, the data of their work, says this is a treasure trove, implying that this data set, this research can speak to a more generalized set of problems, set of questions, set of contexts and areas and times and places than it actually can. That's overgeneralization. Now, the goal with your research is to be as generalizable as possible, because if you solve some problem, if you answer some question with your research, we don't want your answer to only be valuable to the specific individual fields that you collected data on, or the specific wildlife refuge, or the specific counties in Southern Illinois, or the specific FFA or other student organizations. We want to be able to say, okay, so this looked like this for the FFA students, or for these counties and these residents around the Shawnee or this field. We think that probably also applies, not 100%, not exactly. It's not the same as FFA or the other specifics that you studied, but in most respects, it is a lot like it, right? Each of us is individual, but we all have some commonalities as well. So generalization is a process of taking the application of the value of your research and saying we can probably mostly answer the analogous question in some other context to the extent that it's like the context that we have. Overgeneralization is reaching too far. It's saying this is a treasure trove and it can answer all questions for all people for all time. Okay. Selective observation is sort of sort of a fallacy of, or the sin of omission at the opposite end of the scale. Selective observation is we didn't do a full and careful study and collect all of the data we could. We found some things that were weird and interesting, and we focused on those and ignored other valid inputs. So if you plant, 50 rows of soy with some new cultivar or strain that is, maybe more productive or weed resistant or something like that, and you only report results for the top 3 performing individual organisms out of that field of thousands of them, that's selective observation. All of the others apply in that example. Okay, so we can't cherry pick. You'll hear that term in a less formal discussion. It's the same thing as selective observation. It is pulling the individual anecdote instead of the comprehensive or full coverage data set and saying, this is what's going on with this soy cultivar, right? Where those 3 exemplar, just amazing plants are real, but they're like a fraction of a % of the actual reality in that field. Okay, so it's kind of biasing towards things. In forestry, we would call this high grading. Cherry picking a few things that seem very valuable and illegitimately ignoring the rest. Premature closure is running your study and, exactly as it sounds like, closing off your data collection prematurely. That is, if you know that, go back to the soy study in the field, if you know that you have a crazy big storm coming up that's going to destroy some of your soybean crop kind of early, and so you harvest it before the full growth cycle is complete, and then represent that as, these are our results of how this soy cultivar or strain or line goes. That's not actually true. It's not taking into account normal variations in weather patterns like destructive storms. Okay. The halo effect, this is actually used somewhat imprecisely in a couple of different ways. So the halo effect is, in one sense, it's looking at kind of a celebrity researcher and taking what they say as the truth, not looking at the outcome of their research and accepting that as true as far as it goes. All right, so the halo effect is we look favorably on someone or something, and the favorable light shining from that sort of spills onto everything adjacent to it, and we trust the adjacent thing a little bit too much. Okay, so Andrew Wakefield in the UK publishes that false study about vaccines linked with autism, and after it came out that that data set was faked, lots and lots of people were really, really pissed off, and justifiably so, because now people have real stake in vaccines. Things like the measles are coming back. Like, we had measles beat worldwide, and now it's coming back because people are super worried about vaccines more than maybe the data suggests they really have to be. As it turns out, vaccines are amazingly safe, like bizarrely safe. So the halo effect can be that. All right. A couple of key terms, just definitions. Empirical means observed through your physical senses, not just your traditional 5, right? Hearing, smell, taste, sight, touch, but also your many other senses. There are dozens of other senses. Our sense of sort of recent time, of deep time, like geologic time. We have a vestibular sense, our spatial awareness of our orientation. Am I sitting vertically or am I horizontal right now? Am I upside down? Kinesthetic senses, so motor and muscular senses, like the sense of proprioception. What kind of coordination and effort and which specific limb movements will it take for me to jump up on this desk and then jump back down without stopping my fall with my teeth, and so on and so forth. So empirical data are those that are gathered by these means. Field science is very empirical and so forth. It's also by instrumentation extending your sensory input. So empirical data can be things like micrographs. It can be things like quantitative loci and a gene sequence that a machine sequenced for you and tells you this is the sequence of base pairs in this section of a genome. Same thing. More generally, we're talking about any data, at least in a Western society context, any data gathered through our deductive research. There is more under heaven than is dreamed. Horatio, is it a Shakespeare quote or something like that? There are more kinds of data than empirical data, but this is what we're used to when we hear the word science, right? What are the numbers in your lab notebook? That's empirical data. Now, empiricism is also used as an epithet, kind of an insult for research that leans too hard into just data without any sense of what's important about this. So you'll hear the phrase, this smacks of empiricism, as an insult in research circles. And that's not very nice when somebody says that. Saying you are going way too hard in this direction without providing the other half of the value of research, which is thinking about what's going on with interpretation, the value judgments of it, the discussion and the conclusion parts of it. Okay. So data as a word refers to the plural because humans, according to linguistic descriptivists that suggest language is constantly evolving and changing, humans use data as a singular. Look at this data. The true correct version would be look at these data, okay? And you don't want to sound ignorant. Sounds so sophisticated when you refer to plural data. All right, datum is the singular, datum. Methodology versus methods. So in various theses and dissertations, you'll see typically your second or third chapter titled methodology or methods, or some variation of that. Methodology is not the same thing as methods though. So your methodology, ology, is the study of the antecedent. So methodology is the mindset, the principles, the ethics, the philosophy of research, the ontology and epistemology. What can we know and how do we organize, respectively, everything that we know? That's methodology, okay? So your methods chapter, if it has a bunch of stuff why you are doing things the way that you're doing them, that's a methodology chapter. If it is purely a step-by-step list of we prepared this sampling frame, we administered this survey to these people at this time in this place, and we did analysis 1, 2, 3 after cleaning up the data in ways A, B, and C, that's methods. Make sense? So methodology contains methods. Methods are clarified and justified by methodology. Okay. In practice, this is like data versus datum. Nobody's really going to give you a hard time on this in your thesis defense, but it's good for you to think about and know, hey, there's more to my methods than the recipe list of things to do. There's, why am I doing it this way instead of another way? It's part of your methodology. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of different research paradigms. We're gonna mostly be in one of them, and I think it'll be pretty obvious which one that is. So this positivist paradigm refers to logical empiricism, post-positivism, naturalism, lots of different names for basically the same idea. It's become more sophisticated since the start of the scientific revolution, which began in the 1700s, along with the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution, where a lot of people lost their heads. We started getting this shift away from, in Western cultures, essentially the Roman Catholic Church as the authority or arbiter of what is real and true, with things like the scientific revolution. So a scientist would suggest these days that we can't really study the phenomenon, the idea, the concept of God or gods, angels and demons, stuff like that, because there's no way to observe them through instrumentation or direct human sensory input. Does that make sense? Okay, so logical empiricism. This is a very reductionist idea. That is, we boil down all of reality and everything that can be known into data and into the equations that govern the numbers in that data, or the pithy quotes or the themes that govern the qualitative data that you're looking at. All right, so we are looking for exact measures, emphasis on accuracy. How close is our measurement to the true value that we're trying to measure? And precision, for example, which is how close, how agreeing, how consistent are repeated measures of that same thing, accuracy versus precision. Emphasis on getting as close to the real thing as we can. So exact is a bit of a misnomer, right? Every estimate, every measurement that we take is an estimate. It's a model. It's a reduction of the real thing down to some variable. It's dispassionate. Emotion doesn't get a chance to do anything. It's just facts and logic, like that weirdo Ben Shapiro would like to say. All right. Truth is spelled with a capital T. It is known because we can measure it, and nobody can disagree with your measurements as long as you provided your methods and so forth. They can go out and take the same measurement, assuming that phenomenon hasn't gone away, and they should get about the same thing. They won't get exactly the same thing because every measurement is an approximation subject to limitations on accuracy and precision, but we can get pretty close. Okay, so the truth is out there, Mulder and Scully. That might be before some of your time, but it's out there. Okay, so let's talk about religion, which is a bunch of things. Actually, no. Let's stop it right there. It is time to finish. We'll pick it up on Thursday, whether we're on campus or not. We're talking about the logical positivist view of religion, which is going to be a reductio ad absurdum. That is reduction to the absurd, but in Latin, so it sounds fancier. Example of logical positivism and how you would study religion using lab science. All right. See you on Thursday. Good luck with your things. And see you next time. I'll post this recording on the course website in case you'd like to review it. Yeah, I'll post it on the course website. If campus is closed, like everything's shut down, then we won't meet on Thursday. But otherwise, I don't need everybody to come in and risk your life on a 1/4 inch of ice on all these roads first thing Thursday morning. So please be safe. You're very valuable. All right.
Thank you.
So, but it doesn't get over till me, but he was saying upstairs, well, if it starts to die, it's bad, he suspects we'll all go to remote, go home and work from tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be around like